this guy was visibly drunk. I was sitting shotgun. I could literally see empty beer cans and stuff on the floor. Is hitchhiking really as dangerous as everybody thinks it is? When you stick out that thumb, are you basically buying a one-way ticket to Murderville? Or is hitchhiking completely safe with absolutely no risks that you should worry about? The truth is, it's somewhere in the middle of those two extremes, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video today. We're going to go over why hitchhiking is a valuable tool that can be used by hikers. We're going to go over how to hitchhike successfully, how to get rides, and then of course we're going to talk about safety, how to mitigate the risks that do come with hitchhiking as much as you possibly can when you are doing it. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and let's go. I'm going to show you guys how to hitchhike real quick. Ready? Nope. And nope. And just like that, I'm at McDonald's. Now, I do hate hiking, obviously, but I love hitchhiking. Hitchhiking is honestly one of my favorite parts about through hiking and backpacking, which sounds ridiculous, I know, because you're not actually on the trail for the hitchhiking part of it, but honestly, it is a great time. I've met a lot of cool people doing this and had a bunch of awesome experiences. That being said, I don't want to beat around the bush here. I'm not one of those people that's going to claim that hitchhiking is 100% safe 100% of the time. That's just not true. It goes without saying that most people are afraid of hitchhiking. They think hitchhiking is extremely dangerous and something that should like never happen. Like you're just basically playing with your life if you do it. And on the other end of the spectrum, I've met quite a few hikers who have absolutely zero fear of hitchhiking. I mean, they will do it all day, every day. They don't acknowledge any of the risks that are associated with it. And honestly, I just want to be completely real here. I don't think that hitchhiking is nearly as dangerous as everybody thinks it is, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But I also, again, I want to be clear, there are risks associated with hitchhiking. If you have this like wanderlusty idea that it's just going to be some like great adventure and that it's completely safe, that's not the case. In fact, I'm actually going to tell a couple stories at the end of this video that talk about some of the more sketchy encounters that I've had while hitchhiking. I just needed to give this like disclaimer right up front because I really don't want to mislead people on this one. Like obviously hitchhiking is kind of taboo and I think that's a little bit of an understatement. So I want to ask you, the person watching this, to leave a comment with your thoughts on hitchhiking in terms of like a through hike or a backpacking trip, right? Have you done it before? If so, how was your experience? If you have any like cool or sketchy stories, like I definitely want to hear that stuff. So the first point that I want to kind of drive home here right at the beginning is that hitchhiking is not only for through hikers. So I feel like it's pretty common knowledge that through hikers hitchhike, and hitchhiking is almost, I'm gonna say almost a necessity on at least a through hike like the Appalachian Trail, for instance. With that being said, I want to make it clear that hitchhiking is a tool that can be utilized by just normal backpackers as well. You don't have to be doing a through hike in order to get some benefit from hitchhiking. And just as an example of this real quick, I went for a 3-day, 2-night hike in the White Mountains this past September. I was by myself, I only had one car, and I really didn't want to have to repeat any trail. And so I was trying to put together like a 3-day loop in the White Mountain trail system that would repeat as little trail as possible and still get me back to my car. And honestly, I just couldn't make that happen based off of the trailhead I was leaving from and based off of the mileage that I wanted to do every single day. However, because I am willing to hitchhike, I was able to plan it out so that I started obviously where I parked my car, and 3 days later I ended at a trailhead that was a few miles down the road from where I parked. And so if I wasn't willing to hitchhike here, I would have either A, had to hike shorter mileage days, or maybe even, repeated some trail on the loop that I was planning to do, or I would have had to walk on the road for a couple miles at the end of my hike, which obviously would have skewed my daily mileage, first of all, and also road walking just sucks most of the time. But I didn't have to do any of that shit because, I just got to the road and stuck my thumb out at the end of my hike, and before I knew it, I was back at my car, driving full speed towards the nearest restaurant so I could get some food because I was hungry. And with that said, I'm going to get into my second point, which is going to be a tip for successfully getting a ride. So this is the point that I was kind of trying to drive home in the thumbnail for this video, and this is arguably the most important point when it comes to successfully getting picked up when you're hitchhiking. And that is to just look like you're having fun. Look happy, look energetic. I mean, don't look like some bum sitting on the side of the road who has no idea what's going on, no idea where he's going. Put yourself in the driver's shoes, right? So you're going along. Do you want to pick up the person on the side of the road who just looks like miserable and beat up? Or do you want to pick up the person who's kind of smiling, maybe someone who's like dancing around a little bit, looks like they're having a good time? Obviously, you're going to want to pick up the person who just looks happier because, let's face it, that's just not as threatening for the driver. A good tip for this, and this especially works if you're in a group because it's a little bit less awkward, is honestly, dance. Like, I'm not even joking. That sounds ridiculous, I know, but literally just fucking dance. Like, I'm telling you, serial killers just don't dance. So like, there's a 0% chance that they're gonna think you're a serial killer if you do this. With that said, my next tip is to be mindful of your trekking poles if you're hiking with those, and your pack when you're hitchhiking, right? So again, going back to the like being non-threatening point I was just making, if you're carrying two like freaking poles, like obviously like that could hurt your chances of getting a ride, because who wants to pick up a person who's carrying like two things that could be used as spears, for instance? If you can, be sure to collapse those things, maybe, you know, stash them on the side of your pack or whatever. And another point here too is it could help to take your backpack off and actually like put it like at your feet, right? So it's kind of facing the cars that are coming up to you. Now, obviously this isn't gonna like guarantee that you're gonna get a ride, but I do think that it's gonna help. And the reason is because it's just going to make it easier for the people that are driving by you to like realize that you're a hiker and that you're not just like some homeless guy or girl trying to hitchhike across the country or something like that. They're going to see your backpack. They're going to see like the Cuban fiber and all your ultralight nerdy whatever hiking gear, and it's going to be obvious what you're doing. And I'm actually going to touch on this in a few minutes when I start to talk about safety while hitchhiking. Another critical tip when it comes to hitchhiking, I mean, this one is like truly like really important. You need to make sure you're standing in an area where cars are going to have room to pull over, because again, put yourself in the shoes of the driver. Like if you're going along, you're not just going to like fucking stop in the middle of the freaking road to pick up some guy like you don't even know. Obviously, you're going to need a little bit of space to pull off safely. And so when you go to hitchhike, plan it out. Like even if you have to walk up the road or walk down the road, you know, 50 yards or whatever, try to stand in an area where cars can safely pull over to pick you up. And another thing that kind of goes along with this one too is you want to stand in an area where cars have plenty of time to see you, like as they're driving up as well. Because if you're standing on like a bend, or if there's something like blocking you, they're like not even gonna see you in time to stop. So like they might be totally down to pick up your stinky hiker trash ass, but they don't even see you until they're like, you know, freaking driving by already, and they're obviously not gonna slam on the brakes, or maybe they will, I don't know. Second of all too, it's gonna give them a chance to scope you out, I guess. It will give them time to see that you're a hiker. It will give them time to see that you're smiling and maybe even fucking doing a dance or whatever stupid advice I gave you a second ago. And so that's gonna, again, increase your chance of them pulling over and bringing you into town so you can gorge on some hamburgers.
7 cheeseburgers? You ate 7 cheeseburgers?
So next up, let's talk about when you don't get a ride right away. So I will be the first to tell you that time moves super fucking slow while you're hitchhiking. You can be standing on the side of the road for 5 minutes and it's gonna feel like 45 minutes to an hour at least. Like on my Appalachian Trail thru-hike, for instance, there was a number of times where me and a few other people would be hitchhiking. We'd be standing out there for a few minutes and then we'd kind of turn to each other and be like, all right, you know what? We're not gonna get a ride. Let's just call a shuttle so we like know we're gonna be able to get into town. And then we'd go to look at the clock and we'd only been out there for like 10 minutes. I mean, that's really not that long in the grand scheme of things. It feels like forever when you're standing out there, especially if the weather's bad or if it's like really hot and cars are just kind of whizzing by you. Trust me, like give it more time than you actually think. Have fun with it and don't get discouraged when the first couple cars go by. And also, if anybody does what happened to me one time where they put their blinker on, they slow down and they make it look like they're about to pick you up, and then all of a sudden they just like speed away, I mean, or if people like, you know, wave at you, or like they'll give you that, like you'll be standing there with your thumb out and the car will go by, they'll be like, and like people are gonna kind of look at you and make jokes and stuff like that. Yeah, don't get discouraged with that stuff. Have fun with it. If I forgot any tips as far as like getting a ride goes, be sure to leave a comment down below. With that said, I'm going to talk about safety. The first thing that I want to do here is just to address the perceived danger of hitchhiking. It's reasonable, obviously, to be afraid of hitchhiking. And what I really want to kind of stress here is that hitchhiking in the context of a thru hike or a backpacking trip, generally speaking, is safer than just like going out on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere and trying to like hitchhike from city to city. And that might not make sense. You might be like, Kyle, it's still like hitchhiking, like it's got to have the same amount of risk. And I truly believe that it doesn't. It still has risk. Again, I don't want to mislead anybody in that regard, but it's not as dangerous. And the reason is because you have a better chance of being picked up by someone who knows that you're a hiker, who knows what you're doing. The truth is, you're probably going to get picked up by either another hiker, maybe someone who's just like visiting the area, or you're most likely going to get picked up by a local, someone who lives in the area, someone who is familiar with the trail, whatever that trail is that you're hiking, and somebody who picks up hikers on a fairly regular basis. And this is also good because, again, at least in terms of like a thru hike, if you're going into town, they're gonna know like where the hiker spots are. And the reason that getting picked up by these folks kind of lowers the risk associated with hitchhiking is because these are people that probably wouldn't pick up hitchhikers under normal circumstances. So they're not the kind of people that would just pick up, again, like some random dude trying to hitchhike 300 miles across the country or something like that. These are the kind of people, honestly, people like you and myself as well, that would only pick up hitchhikers when they are standing next to a trailhead, when they look like they are backpacking or thru hiking. With that being said, you're still going to get picked up by randos sometimes. That's just kind of how it goes. And so tip number one, this is arguably the most important safety tip. Do a thorough look over of the car that's picking you up, and not only the car but the driver as well. So you don't need to just like rush into the car as soon as they pull over. Take your time. Make sure like there's no obvious signs that this person might be troubled. And this isn't like a foolproof method, obviously, but it's at least going to add one initial layer of safety, I guess. And then again, go up to the driver before you get in the car and just kind of chat with them for a minute. Now, obviously, they're probably not going to want to stand there and talk all day, and I don't think you are either. You're probably hungry. Most of the time, just from talking for like 30 seconds, you're going to kind of have an idea of whether or not this person has bad intentions, or even if they don't have bad intentions, whether or not they're just like a little bit sketchy, I guess. And another tip that kind of goes along with this one is be clear on where you're going before you get into that car. So make sure you ask them where they're going before you tell them where you're going, so you know whether or not they're actually going to be like in the area that you want to go to. And then at that point, tell them where you're going, and don't just tell them like the town, literally tell them where in the town that you're trying to go. Say, I'm trying to go to this specific street, this specific restaurant, hotel, whatever it is. If you don't want to tell them exactly where you're going, at least give them like a specific place to drop you off. This will help avoid any like confusion or awkwardness when you're in the car, or even worse, this will help you avoid being dropped off in the place that you like didn't fucking want to go. So that is super important as well. Another huge safety tip is to just have your phone and your wallet or any other like essential items on your person when you get into the car. In like an ideal world, you'll be able to have your pack with you too. I mean, if you can do that, like say you're in the back of a pickup truck and you're in the back seat and your pack's right there, that's like even better, but that's not always possible from my experience. So at the very least, have your phone and your wallet or anything else that you need on your person. That way, like worst case, if like something happens and you get separated from all your gear, you're still gonna have, you know, your phone and your wallet. I don't need to explain why that's super important, but obviously you want that stuff. So this next safety tip is another like pretty obvious one. Try to hitchhike in groups of other people if you can. I know it's not always possible. I've hitchhiked by myself before plenty of times, but if I can hitchhike with another hiker, I will always take that option. Obviously, safety in numbers, I don't need to like explain why that's a thing, but it certainly is. So I mentioned that I was going to tell some stories about some sketchy hitchhiking encounters that I've had before. If you are an experienced hiker and you have some more safety tips that I did not include, be sure to leave them in a comment below. With that said, let me tell these stories. So I guess I'll start by saying that the vast majority of experiences I've had hitchhiking have been positive. There's only been 2 times ever hitchhiking for me that it was a little bit sketchy. I'm not trying to like scaremonger here. Again, this shouldn't dissuade you from hitchhiking, but I do just want to be realistic and make clear that yes, on occasion, some sketchy shit might happen when you're hitchhiking. So the first story I'm going to tell was from my Appalachian Trail thru hike in 2018. I was hitchhiking out of Wind Gap, Pennsylvania. Me and my boy Mullet Mike got picked up by this like older dude. He was probably in his like early 60s maybe. And his demeanor was just like a little bit aggressive. Not towards us. I want to be clear about that. He was not aggressive towards us. It was just kind of like general aggression. He was talking about his like ex-wife, and he was saying like some not very nice stuff about his ex-wife, and I just got the sense that this guy was just like not in a great mood, and he was just kind of using us to like rant and ramble. That definitely made Mullet Mike and I uncomfortable. Fortunately, the ride was short. Obviously, you're not gonna like, you know, contradict what he's saying. Like, he's the one driving. He just picked you up and stuff. And so, yeah, we just kind of, you know, kept our mouths shut and just kind of, you know, went along with what he was saying. And again, it was a short ride, so we were out of that car within 10 minutes of when we got picked up, and we were fine. But it was still just a little bit sketchy. This next story involves a drunk driver. In this story, I did not listen to the advice that I just gave, particularly the advice about looking over the car and the driver before you get in. So this was in 2016. I was thru hiking the Vermont Long Trail, and I was going into a town called Johnson, Vermont. So right as I put my thumb out with a couple friends, it started to downpour. Like, the sky just opened up, and because of this, like, we were going into town, like, we didn't want to get soaking wet, obviously. And so like when a car pulled over right after that, we didn't even think twice about it. We just hopped right into the car and immediately realized that it was a bad idea. Again, if we had just done a quick like look over here, we could have avoided this entire situation. I think the first red flag about this car was that it had Texas license plates, and we were again in like northern Vermont. So this guy was visibly drunk. I was sitting shotgun. I could literally see empty beer cans and stuff on the floor. And at that point, I mean, sure, we could have asked him to pull over, but it was kind of too late. Again, thankfully, this was like an even shorter ride. We were literally just hitchhiking a couple miles here. Fortunately, we turned out fine. Like, we made it into town, no problems at all. But again, if we had just looked over the car, looked over the driver before we got in, I know it was pouring rain, but like, you gotta take the time to do this stuff, folks. Again, one more time, I'm gonna say it. Leave a comment if you have any more tips as far as getting rides, or as far as safety goes when you're hitchhiking. And again, subscribe. You know you want to. Make sure you smash that like button as well. End of the video, putting the cards up, go watch another video, or subscribe, blah, 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 blah. That's